April 7, 1943. Debadura Airfield, New Guinea. Captain Thomas Lanphier Jr. checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 0725 hours. In 11 days, if intelligence was correct, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's transport would be crossing Bougainville's southern coast at exactly 0935 hours, flying at precisely 4,500 feet. Lanphier walked around his P-38 Lightning, running his hand along the twin-boom configuration that made the aircraft instantly recognizable from any angle. Back in Europe, Luftwaffe pilots called it der Gabelschwanzteufel, the fork-tailed devil, though the nickname initially carried mockery rather than respect. German fighter pilots had laughed at the unconventional design when P-38s first appeared over North Africa in late 1942. They built 2 half-planes and bolted them together. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler had written after his first encounter with P-38s over Tunisia. Clumsy, ungainly, 2 engines that make it heavy and slow to turn. The Americans don't understand fighter design. Our 109s and 190s will eat them for breakfast. What Stigler and the Luftwaffe intelligence officers analyzing the twin-boom configuration didn't know was that Lockheed had created something unprecedented. A fighter that could fly higher, faster, and farther than anything Germany or Japan possessed. A fighter whose twin-engine configuration provided redundancy that brought pilots home when single-engine fighters would have fallen from the sky. A fighter whose concentrated nose armament created a cone of destruction that obliterated anything it touched. And in 11 days, this clumsy aircraft would execute the most precisely planned aerial assassination in military history, killing the architect of Pearl Harbor and proving that unconventional design could achieve what conventional fighters couldn't dream of attempting. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning emerged from a February 1937 U.S. Army Air Corps specification, calling for a high-altitude interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet with endurance of 1 hour at full throttle. The requirements seemed contradictory. Speed required power, power required large engines. Large engines meant weight, and weight reduced speed and climb rate. Lockheed's chief engineer Hall Hibbard and his assistant Clarence Kelly Johnson proposed a radical solution. Twin engines mounted in nacelles on twin booms, with a cockpit and armament in a central nacelle between them. The configuration provided the power needed for speed while maintaining a streamlined profile. Counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque effects. Tricycle landing gear, revolutionary for fighters, improved visibility and reduced ground accidents. When the XP-38 prototype first flew on January 27, 1939, it looked like nothing else in the sky. Traditional fighter pilots saw an aircraft that violated every design convention. But on February 11, 1939, the XP-38 flew from California toward New York in 7 hours and 2 minutes, averaging 350 miles per hour, a transcontinental speed record that suggested this unconventional design worked brilliantly. By 1941, P-38s were entering service. Early models faced technical problems. Engines overheated at high altitude, turbochargers failed, controls froze in dives. German intelligence reports dismissed the Lightning as another failed American experiment. Interesting concept, poor execution, summarized a Luftwaffe assessment. Not a serious threat. But American engineers were solving problems systematically. New intercoolers managed heat. Improved turbochargers provided reliable performance. Dive flaps prevented control freezing. By 1943, the P-38G and H models arriving in combat theaters were formidable weapons. The Pacific Theater proved perfect for P-38 capabilities. The vast distances favored aircraft with long range. The twin engines provided safety over endless ocean. The concentrated firepower, 4.50 caliber machine guns and 120 mm cannon, all mounted in the nose, created devastating strike capability without worrying about convergence angles. Japanese pilots initially shared German contempt. Two-tailed devil, they called it, though the nickname reflected growing fear. P-38s could dive faster than Zeros, climb higher, and maintain speeds the nimble Japanese fighters couldn't match. By April 1943, P-38s dominated South Pacific skies. But they were about to undertake their most famous mission. The intelligence breakthrough came on April 13, 1943. Navy codebreakers decrypted a Japanese message detailing Admiral Yamamoto's inspection tour. The architect of Pearl Harbor would fly from Rabaul to Bougainville on April 18th. The message specified aircraft types, departure time, flight path, speed, altitude, and arrival time with precision that seemed too good to be true. Admiral Chester Nimitz faced a momentous decision. Killing Yamamoto would deal Japan a devastating blow and eliminate their best strategic mind. But the mission risked revealing that American codebreakers had cracked Japanese naval codes. Intelligence advantage potentially more valuable than any single target. After consultation with Washington, the decision came: kill Yamamoto. The mission would require fighters to fly 435 miles from Guadalcanal to the intercept point near Bougainville, engage enemy fighters, and return, a round trip exceeding 1,000 miles over enemy-controlled ocean. Only one aircraft in the Pacific Theater had that range, the P-38 Lightning. Major John Mitchell, commanding the 339th Fighter Squadron, received the assignment. 18 P-38s would make the attempt, 14 as covering force, for as killer flight to engage Yamamoto's transport. The mission planning was meticulous. They would fly at wave-top altitude to avoid Japanese radar, navigate by dead reckoning across 435 miles of ocean, arrive at the precise intercept point within seconds of Yamamoto's aircraft, and destroy the bomber carrying Japan's most valuable officer. The margin for error was essentially zero. Arrive too early, Japanese fighters would be alerted. Too late, Yamamoto would land safely. Navigate poorly, they'd miss the intercept entirely, wasting fuel over enemy territory with no hope of reaching home. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber would lead the killer flight. Both were experienced P-38 pilots who understood their aircraft's capabilities intimately. They knew the Lightning's strengths, speed, range, firepower, altitude performance. They knew its weaknesses, relatively poor turning ability, heavy controls at low speed. The mission would play to every strength while avoiding situations where weaknesses mattered. April 18, 1943, 0725 hours. 18 P-38 Lightnings, each carrying two 165-gallon drop tanks, extending range to over 1,200 miles, taxied for takeoff from Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The aircraft looked predatory, twin booms sweeping back from massive Allison V 1710 engines, central nacelle bristling with guns, the whole assembly suggesting speed and lethality. Mitchell led the formation into the air, climbing briefly before descending to 50 feet above the waves. For the next 2 hours and 15 minutes, the P-38s would fly in radio silence at altitudes where wave spray occasionally hit windscreens, navigating by Mitchell's dead reckoning across open ocean. The Lightning's twin-engine configuration proved its worth immediately. Flying for hours at low altitude over water in single-engine fighters created constant anxiety about engine failure. In a P-38, one engine could fail and the aircraft would still fly. This psychological advantage allowed pilots to focus on navigation rather than worrying about ditching. At 0934 hours, 1 minute before scheduled intercept, the formation reached Bougainville's southern coast. Mitchell's navigation had been perfect, 435 miles across open ocean, arriving within 60 seconds of planned time at the exact intercept point. At 0935 hours precisely, lookouts spotted aircraft. Two Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers flying at 4,500 feet, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. The intelligence had been perfect. Yamamoto was aboard one of those bombers, precisely where codebreakers said he'd be, exactly when they predicted. Bogies. 11 o'clock, high. The radio silence broke as Mitchell ordered the attack. The four-plane killer flight, Lanphier, Barber, and wingmen, broke upward toward the bombers. The remaining P-38s positioned to intercept the Zero escort. The Zeros reacted immediately, diving to protect the bombers. But P-38 pilots had learned not to turn with Zeros. They used speed, firepower, and energy tactics. What happened in the next 90 seconds would be debated for decades. Lanphier later claimed he engaged Zeros, shot down one, then attacked the lead bomber. Barber's account differed. He claimed Lanphier was engaged with Zeros, while Barber attacked both bombers alone. The controversy over who killed Yamamoto would persist for decades. But what happened next was indisputable. P-38 guns destroyed both Betty bombers within 90 seconds. The concentrated nose armament, 4.50 caliber machine guns, and 120 mm cannon, fired 3,800 rounds per minute combined. The Bettys, nicknamed flying lighters due to their vulnerability, stood no chance. One bomber, hit repeatedly by 20 mm cannon shells and .50 caliber rounds, crashed into the jungle. The other, trailing smoke and fire, crashed into the ocean. Admiral Yamamoto died in the jungle crash, killed by P-38 gunfire or impact. Japanese search parties would find his body still strapped into a seat, gripping his katana. The P-38s broke off, using superior speed to disengage from the Zeros. 3 Zeros were destroyed. 1 P-38 was lost, shot down during the furious combat. The remaining P-38s returned to Guadalcanal, having executed the most precisely planned aerial assassination in military history. The mission's success validated every controversial aspect of P-38 design. The twin-engine configuration provided the range no single-engine fighter possessed. The twin-boom layout housed engines and turbochargers that maintained power at altitude and provided fuel capacity for 1,000+ mile missions. The tricycle landing gear made takeoff and landing safer with heavy fuel loads. The concentrated nose armament allowed pilots to fire all weapons at a single point without worrying about convergence. News of Yamamoto's death shocked Japan. The man who had planned Pearl Harbor was dead, killed by American fighters executing a mission that demonstrated devastating intelligence and operational capability. Japanese morale suffered catastrophically. But the full story wasn't released immediately. The U.S. government feared revealing that code-breaking had provided the intelligence. German pilots, initially contemptuous of the twin-boom Lightning, began revising assessments as P-38s arrived in Europe. Over North Africa, P-38s demonstrated altitude performance that German fighters couldn't match. At 40,000 feet, where Bf-109s and FW-190s gasped for air, P-38s operated effortlessly. The turbocharged Allison engines maintained power at altitudes where German engines failed. Hauptmann Hans-Joachim Marseille encountered P-38s over North Africa before his death in September 1942. His assessment was sober. The American twin-engine fighter is faster than anticipated and climbs better than intelligence suggested. The twin-boom configuration houses powerful turbochargers that maintain performance at altitude. In turning combat, we have advantage, but the Americans don't turn. They dive, attack, and climb away using superior speed. We cannot catch them when they disengage. The concentrated nose armament particularly impressed German pilots who survived P-38 attacks. German fighters mounted guns in wings and fuselage, requiring convergence calculations. The P-38's guns fired from a single point, making gunnery simpler and more devastating. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff described a P-38 encounter. "I saw one attack a Bf-110. The American fired one burst, perhaps 2 seconds. The 110 disintegrated. Not shot down, destroyed. Pieces everywhere." The concentration of firepower from those nose guns was beyond anything we faced from other Allied fighters. By 1944, P-38s equipped with drop tanks were escorting bombers to Berlin. The twin-boom design that inspired derision was enabling missions beyond the capability of conventional aircraft. The Lightning's success in killing Yamamoto demonstrated capabilities that transcended raw performance specifications. The mission required range, reliability, firepower, and pilot skill. The P-38 provided all four. The unconventional design wasn't Lockheed forgetting how to build normal aircraft. It was understanding that exceptional performance required unconventional solutions. By war's end, P-38s had destroyed more Japanese aircraft than any other USAF fighter in the Pacific. America's top two aces, Major Richard Bong with 40 victories and Major Thomas Maguire with 38. Both flew P-38s exclusively. The aircraft German and Japanese pilots, Mott became the most prolific killer in the Pacific theater. The technical analysis reveals why the P-38 succeeded. The twin engines provided 2,850 horsepower combined, far more than any single-engine fighter. This power enabled speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour and climb rates approaching 4,000 feet per minute. The twin-boom configuration housed turbocharger systems that gave the P-38 extraordinary high-altitude performance. Each engine had a General Electric turbocharger mounted in the tail of its boom. The turbochargers compressed intake air, allowing engines to maintain sea-level power at altitudes approaching 40,000 feet. The central nacelle, housing cockpit and armament, provided pilot visibility that single-engine fighters couldn't match. The pilot sat high, with excellent forward and downward visibility. The concentrated nose armament was perhaps the most significant advantage. All 5 guns fired through the nose, with no convergence issues. The guns were mounted tightly clustered within an 18-inch circle. When a P-38 fired, all rounds passed through the same point in space. This created devastating effects. 5 guns firing through the same point delivered approximately 63 projectiles per second to a very small area. Nothing could withstand that concentrated destruction. German and Japanese pilots who survived P-38 attacks consistently described the firepower as beyond anything they'd experienced. The tricycle landing gear provided excellent ground visibility, reducing accident rates. The counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque effects that plague single-engine fighters, making the Lightning stable and easy to fly. The twin-engine redundancy provided safety that single-engine fighters couldn't offer. Lose an engine in a P-38, and you could fly home on the remaining engine. Every aspect of the P-38 that looked unconventional served essential purposes. The twin booms weren't aesthetic choices. They were engineering solutions to complex problems. Lockheed's designers understood that achieving the required performance required abandoning conventional configurations. The combat record proved they were right. The P-38 achieved kill ratios exceeding 2-to-1 in the Pacific and respectable ratios in Europe. More significantly, the Lightning enabled missions no other fighter could attempt. The Yamamoto mission was the most dramatic example. In the European theater, P-38s escorted bombers to targets beyond fighter range. They flew photo reconnaissance missions deep into Germany. They performed ground attack missions and night fighter duties. The versatility enabled by the twin-engine configuration made the P-38 a multi-role aircraft. Japanese pilots learned to fear the twin-boom configuration. By late 1943, Japanese intelligence briefings warned pilots about P-38 tactics. A captured Japanese tactical manual advised, the American twin-engine fighter possesses superior speed, altitude performance, and firepower. Do not attempt to outrun it or climb. If engaged from altitude, attempt to force close-range turning combat, where zero maneuverability provides advantage. However, experienced P-38 pilots will refuse turning engagement. The German experience paralleled the Japanese. Initial mockery gave way to respect, then fear. By 1944, Luftwaffe pilots facing P-38s understood they were confronting a formidable opponent. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff reflected post-war, "We laughed at it initially. The design looked absurd. But in combat, we learned it wasn't absurd at all. It was brilliant." The Americans had identified capabilities they needed: range, altitude performance, firepower, and designed an aircraft to provide them, regardless of whether it looked conventional. We kept trying to perfect the conventional single-engine fighter. Our aircraft were beautiful, but couldn't do what the P-38 could do. The Americans understood that function matters more than form. The Yamamoto mission remained the ultimate demonstration because it combined everything the aircraft did well: long range, precision navigation, lethal firepower, and ability to penetrate enemy airspace and return safely. The mission profile showcased the Lightning's strengths while avoiding situations where weaknesses might have mattered. No other fighter in 1943 could have executed that mission. The P-47 lacked the range. The P-51 wasn't yet available in the Pacific. The F-4U Corsair had neither the range nor high-altitude performance. British Spitfires couldn't approach the required range. German and Japanese fighters were even further from necessary capabilities. Only the P-38, with its unconventional twin-boom configuration housing systems that provided range, power, and reliability, could fly to Bougainville, kill Yamamoto, and return to Guadalcanal. The mission validated every design choice Lockheed had made. In 1985, surviving Yamamoto mission participants held a reunion. Thomas Lanphier, Rex Barber, and other pilots who had flown that day gathered to commemorate the mission. By then elderly, their dispute over credit for killing Yamamoto had mellowed with time. "We did something nobody thought possible," Barber reflected. "We flew farther than fighters were supposed to fly, found a target the size of 2 aircraft in empty sky over enemy territory, destroyed that target in seconds, and came home." The P-38 made it possible. Those twin booms everyone laughed at housed the turbos that gave us power. The twin engines gave us range and confidence to fly 435 miles over water. The nose guns gave us firepower to destroy the Bettys instantly. Major John Mitchell emphasized the navigation achievement. Getting there was the real miracle. 435 miles over open ocean with no landmarks, no radio navigation, dead reckoning only. If I was off by 5 degrees, we'd miss the intercept by 50 miles. The P-38's range made the mission possible, but execution required perfection. The legacy of the P-38 extends beyond World War II. The aircraft influenced post-war fighter design in fundamental ways. The concept of twin-engine fighters for specific roles became accepted doctrine. The concentrated nose armament concept became standard on jet fighters. The emphasis on multi-role capability that characterized later fighters traced back to the P-38. Several P-38s survive in museums, preserved as examples of innovative engineering. The most famous is Glacier Girl, recovered from Greenland ice in 1992 after 50 years buried under 268 feet of ice. Restored to flying condition, it demonstrates at air shows, showing audiences what the twin-boom fighter looked like in flight. The final assessment of the P-38 must acknowledge both successes and limitations. The aircraft was expensive, roughly twice the cost of a P-51. It was complex to maintain. It was challenging for inexperienced pilots. In European combat, it suffered from cockpit heating problems. But these limitations pale against achievements. The Lightning enabled missions no other fighter could attempt. It killed Yamamoto. It produced America's top 2 aces. It destroyed 1,800 Japanese aircraft. It escorted bombers to Berlin. It flew missions that shaped Allied strategy. Most significantly, it proved that unconventional design could succeed brilliantly when serving clear operational purposes. Critics who mocked the configuration were judging by appearance rather than function. They were wrong. The P-38 fought superbly, just not the way conventional fighters fought. The German and Japanese pilots who laughed at the twin-boom configuration learned through bitter experience that appearance meant nothing and capability meant everything. The fork-tailed devil killed them efficiently and returned home safely. The Yamamoto mission stands forever as ultimate proof. On April 18, 1943, the P-38 Lightning did something no other aircraft could have done. Flew 435 miles over enemy ocean, arrived at the exact planned time and place, killed the architect of Pearl Harbor, and returned home. The twin booms that everyone mocked made it possible. Admiral Yamamoto died because American engineers had designed an unconventional fighter and American pilots had learned to fly it brilliantly. The mission required every capability the Lightning possessed, and execution was flawless. The Germans and Japanese stopped laughing. They learned to fear the distinctive silhouette. They learned the concentrated nose guns could destroy aircraft instantly. They learned the high-altitude performance gave untouchable superiority. They learned that American innovation had created something they couldn't counter. The P-38 Lightning proved itself as one of World War II's most effective fighters. The twin booms that inspired derision housed technology that enabled victory. And on April 18, 1943, those twin booms carried American pilots to accomplish a mission that changed the Pacific War. The fork-tailed devil had spoken, and Admiral Yamamoto learned too late that unconventional design wielded by determined pilots creates consequences conventional thinking never anticipates. The twin booms were not a flaw. They were the key to killing the man who had awakened the sleeping giant.